If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the happiest Heretic Happy Hour podcast on the planet. And I am one of many hosts, Keith Giles. I'm the author of several books, including the most recently released Jesus Undefeated, Condemning the False Doctrine of Eternal Torment. And we are smack dab in the middle, near the end, really, of a series we're doing about the Sermon on the Mount. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, put your feet up, and get yourself ready for some awesome podcasting going on right here. But first, I think my co-hosts need to introduce themselves. So boys and girls, say hi.
I am Katie Valentine. I'm aiming to be your most heretical of the heretical hosts this week. And I like to talk about sex positivity. So you could read my book, Sex, Slavery, and Self-Control in a Pauline Community, where I talk a little bit about that.
I am Derek Dave. I'm the author of Deconstructing Religion. And I will see Katie's heresy and raise it a heretic. Because I aim to be the biggest fucking heretic on the team.
Well, yeah, there you go.
And my name's Ricky Gantz, and you're all heretics.
You guys are dangerous.
I'm just playing. No, I'm Matt DiStefano, and I'm just a good old-fashioned heretic, maybe an apostate these days. So I won't challenge you all to a heresy off. But
dig that, man.
Dig it.
Did you know, fellow listeners, boys and girls, that we have a hotline? You can reach us by exercising the dexterity of your index finger and dial 240-343-7379. Once again, that's 240-343-7379. And we have a text. Roll text. Hi, guys. This is Steve from Massachusetts. First, I want to say that I love your podcast and I enjoyed the new host episode of a PSA on PSA. This sparked a thought that I would love for you to comment on. As you said, there are lots of atonement theories, but I find it interesting that the New Testament never clearly spells it out, and the writers appear to be working it out even then. What if this is supposed to be a koan? What the fuck is a koan?
No idea. That's
right. Kovifi.
Yeah.
It's pronounced Kofifi.
Is that a typo? Maybe he typed.
There's a question mark there. So, yeah. It's like, hey, Derek, like, really, what the hell? But anyway, or something along the lines of Jesus' parables, meaning we're supposed to wrestle with what it means, but is there not supposed to be a single answer? Keep up the great work. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Interesting.
So I think it's cone, and I know just enough to be really dangerous about this.
Okay.
And I think it's part of a Buddhist tradition. I think Zen Buddhism and Buddha. And so when someone is given a cone, when a monk is given a cone, they meditate on it often for years. And there is, like Steve said, no simple answer. And I think they go to their masters with an answer, but you work with this in your mind and spirit for a long, long time. And so that's as much as I know.
Yeah, and Alan Watts was the master at this. He would use kind of these arguments or logical sequences, and he would put you in what's called a double bind to get you to realize the futility of your logic. So I think maybe it sort of is a cone, but I think maybe it's a little bit different. Like I said in the episode that's being referenced, I don't think there's one atonement theory that can really grasp the whole meaning of atonement, and I think it would be futile to say otherwise. So maybe in that way, it's sort of a cone. But I think the point being is that yes, I think we still have to wrestle with this, just as the New Testament writers would wrestle with it.
I think atonement theories in large part are kind of a mistake. It's almost like a theological pretzel we get ourselves into just because we feel like we have to sort of make all these things make some sort of sense or provide some sort of overarching way of tying all these different theological ideas together in some nice, neat little bow. So yeah, I guess for me, I mean, I'll say this: I love what you said here, Steve. I am much more interested in the fact that maybe these things are just there for these different metaphors about the atonement, about the crucifixion. Maybe they really are meant for us just to embrace the mystery of them, and not so much things puzzles we're supposed to solve. So, I mean, I hope it's that because I'm much more comfortable with that than with this whole idea of like, no, there's some one single overarching, theory that makes everything make sense.
Yeah, everything, just one thing that covers everything, that takes care of all the 40,000 plus denominations.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, one thing I want to say though, real quick, and this is just kind of like beside the point, but we have this neat sound effect for every time we say cuss word. I would like to have a sound effect for when someone uses something really highbrow like cone. I mean, I want equal time here.
Yeah, well,
I feel like we can have a Star Trek, like
there you go.
screen
Yeah,
shift or something. But
Okay.
I love this question from Steve, or the comment from Steve, because it really points to the multivalency of Scripture. And when we shift from having an answer to having many answers that are meditated on over years, something like as complex as the Sermon on the Mount or as complex as a parable. I'm so glad you brought up parables. They do have new meaning year after year, week after week. And when we stop pinpointing to one answer, we have this possibility of many answers. So not quite a cone in the same way, but more like an unfolding flower.
I like
It
that.
continues to have meaning, meaning anew. And Jesus shows us that. Jesus is always reinterpreting.
Yep.
And so are we.
I like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. So you know what? I think that may mean it's time for us to transition here.
Yeah. Let's get that heretic.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
Hi there. My name is Jeremy Courtney, and I'm the Heretic of the Week.
Hi, Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy. I tell you what, it's kind of a dream of mine to have you on this podcast. I've been a huge fan of you. I think I saw a TED Talk you did a couple of years ago, just kind of talking about this vision you had, and then started getting involved with Preemptive Love and supporting what you guys do. And you've written some books. Really, I just love you. I love your heart. And this is the first time you and I have actually spoken. So I want to welcome you to the podcast. And we usually kick things off by asking the first question of our guests. Jeremy, why is it that anybody would possibly consider you a heretic?
Oh, well, how much time do we have? There's a lot of reasons why people think.
You know what? We have half an hour. Do whatever you want.
It's certainly it's a common occurrence, I would say. Where to start? I mean, I moved away from the United States shortly in the aftermath of the September 11th terror attacks. I was kind of conscripted into the war on terror as a missionary and lived for a number of years in the Middle East as a missionary, and then stopped doing that and started a new kind of way of living. And for that reason, if not as well for many others, I have had a number of people accuse me, and that shift in my life toward the humanitarian work that we do now with Preemptive Love Coalition, of being a heretic.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, is part of that disconnect or criticism that you get from some of these people, is it because you have shifted from preaching the gospel to sort of doing things that practically express the gospel?
Yeah, I mean, the word heretic can be a very personal thing depending on who's saying it. So I think every person ends up maybe having their own motivation or their own fear that they're compensating for, their own lens on why they might be saying that. But yeah, I mean, broad strokes. We've just moved. I think here's how I would sum it up. I have most often been accused of apostasy, heresy, betrayal, watering things down, losing salvation, all those things. by those who have generally not left home and certainly not left home base on the order of what we have, having moved out into the Middle East, living. I'm calling in now from Iraq, where I've lived here in Iraq for nearly 15 years. We've experienced a lot of things, and I understand it can be hard to kind of synthesize those things back into your worldview if you've not experienced some of what we've experienced. And so the word that we often put on that inability to synthesize is heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that seems to be a common thread, no matter where you fall on. If you're talking about racism, it seems like the people who are the most racist don't have black friends, for example. Or if you're talking about homophobia, people have not befriended gay people. If you're talking about what is good Christian salvation, how we're going to view this, you probably haven't gone and lived out in Iraq like you have. You've lived here in the States or wherever you're calling calling home, normally in the Western world, but probably elsewhere. And you really haven't met or dealt with people in your life that think differently than you and see things completely different.
Yeah, I think there's something about leaving the Shire that that makes us.
Yeah.
Well, it just challenges the story. It challenges everything in the Shire. And when we try and bring foreign experiences back home to the Shire, there's antibodies built up to protect us from kind of those foreign invading alien forces, stories, realities, values. And I think it's all very normal. And yet, we have to do it. We have to be exposed to germs from the outside, or we're actually vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, since we have about 25 minutes left, I guess we're going to talk Tolkien because I'm a total Tolkien dork. So thank you for making that analogy.
I want to be explicit in saying that the germs thing is a metaphor. I don't think that foreign people or foreign religions or anything like that, things that I don't understand, are not necessarily wrong or germy or whatever nasty. It's just a metaphor to kind of dig in on that antibodies attack type thing that I was referencing earlier.
Yeah. Well, I think, going back to what you're saying, the thing I've been noticing as well when I interact with different people and they have these sort of negative pushbacks on these different approaches to people of different faiths or different belief systems, even within our faith, it's sort of this like, we have to, I don't know, I just feel like American Christians are very tribalistic. We're very us and them oriented. It's the assumption that I'm right and all the things that I believe are right, and I can't possibly be wrong about any of those things. And anyone who doesn't think the same way I do is a heretic or is, questionable as far as whether they're going to be saved or not, or those kinds of things. And yet, like you said, it kind of stems from the fact that we haven't really taken any time to get to know anybody who thinks. In other words, we're not really learning how to listen, and we're not holding loosely to our assumptions to recognize, we could be wrong about a few things.
Yeah, I think white American Christian evangelicals in particular, of our general age group, have enjoyed such a position of kind of unassailed power for so long that there is kind of a default sense that we are right and we are not used to being challenged, and we're not used to doing a lot of self-reflection on our worldview and our default assumptions. But I will say, I don't think it's an exclusively American or Christian or white people problem. I think it's actually a feature of faith. Yeah. All faith, broadly speaking, goes through that stage of, basically assuming that it is intrinsically right. And there is a way of understanding our faith development where to get a stronger faith, we actually have to push back against it. We have to question it. We have to interrogate our own assumptions and our own faith. And that leads
Yeah.
to kind of a whole stage of faith development called like differentiation, might be one way you talk about it, where you're deliberately trying to distance yourself from everything you've ever known in faith. And the truth is, very few people go through that level of differentiated faith, and even fewer still go to the next level, which is a kind of synthesizing move back toward home, back toward the thing that you grew up with, back toward some of your previous assumptions, only now on a higher plane, on a higher, more integrative level. And I think we see that in Islam, we see it in Judaism, we see it in Christianity, we see it in Buddhist and meditative practices. I think it's a feature of faith and faithfulness and belief. It's not purely a Christian or American problem.
Yeah, exactly. So just to get a little more specific and drive us a little further down this road of things I know we want to cover in our interview, I know that and you touched on this a little bit, talking about around the time of 9/11 and all of that. So it seems like, just from what I know of your story, and I'm trying to get you to talk a little bit more about what that was like and what was driving that. It seems like you experienced sort of a shift away from what we're describing, sort of the white evangelical, middle class perspective, and you had this shift that caused you to take a pretty radical step to express the love of Christ to who at the time were our enemies. In a very beautiful and powerful way. And so if you would, could you talk a little bit about like what led you to take that step? What was it that drove that? And then please, of course, explain for people listening who don't know about preemptive love and what it's all about.
Yeah, so in the aftermath of September 11th, a lot of the people around me, I would say maybe the majority of the people around me in Texas, where I was going to school at the time, spoke of Muslims and Middle Easterners and Arabs and all that we kind of think of as the Muslim world. The people around me spoke of them with great angst, fear, and vilification at that time, and we knew we didn't want to be like that. We knew we didn't want to be like all in hating Muslims. And so while a lot of our friends and family and acquaintances were grabbing guns and kind of going off to war in Afghanistan and then later Iraq, we grabbed our Bibles and went off to save the Muslims. They were going off to kill the Muslims. We were going off to save the Muslims. We did that faithfully as a true expression of love, as best we knew love at that time. But after trying it for a number of years, I think it started to reveal blind spots that we had. We didn't know Muslims at the time that we took up the call to go change them and save them and disparage their faith and promote the singular supremacy of our own. Like we didn't even know. Everything we knew was very abstract. And when we finally moved into the neighborhood and met Muslims for the first time and knew Muslims and were cared for by Muslims and protected by Muslims, it put, well, to use a Christian term, it helped Islam become incarnated. They incarnated Islam for us. Now they were not just an abstraction. They weren't just spirit. They weren't just philosophy and ideas. They were real human beings in our life. And that started to change our own posture. It started to change our own theology. It changed our practice. And fast forward a number of years, I had a profound religious kind of awakening experience that I write about in my book. But it changed everything ultimately. And I came out of this kind of wakeful, prayerful vision completely transformed.
Yeah.
And we were living in Turkey at the time. We ended up moving into Iraq in the middle of the Iraq war. trying to turn over a new leaf. We knew that we didn't want to do the conversionary missionary church planting thing anymore. We were becoming more and more aware of human needs, economics, social systems, politics. We knew we wanted a more kind of well-rounded response, not just talking about people's souls and where they go when they die. And so we moved into Iraq to start figuring out how to be humanitarians and how to respond to the suffering of the Iraq War, and ended up starting our own organization called Preemptive Love to respond to those needs at that time.
Hmm. So I think the thing I think specifically, at least when I first heard your story, the thing specifically that you noticed when you got there, which is so beautiful, like actually go there in person, observe, learn. These are all beautiful steps. I think many people that want to consider themselves missionaries should probably adopt similar tactics. Don't just come with the answer. Come first, listening and learning and understanding. And so, anyway, it seems like what you did was what you noticed was as a result of the conflict, there were the U.S. military in their tanks use these depleted uranium shells, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's depleted uranium. And when the projectile is fired through the barrel, it superheats and it actually can cut through concrete and steel like butter, which is why we use them. It's an incredibly effective projectile. But the problem is we left these things lying all over the place, and they are still radioactive. And that was causing some pretty serious birth defects, right? And you noticed that.
Yeah, I would, just for the sake of clarity and precision, I would add a little color. A couple of things. As best we can tell, the munitions themselves don't seem to pose any threat in their unexploded form.
Okay.
The radioactive qualities that they seem to possess as a byproduct of the uranium enrichment process is too minuscule to even break through our skin. And
Wow.
the chemical toxicity of the uranium as a heavy metal really doesn't pose any threat as a shell there sitting on the ground or in a warehouse or whatever. The problem is when they explode, that heavy metal aerosolizes. It turns into particles that are so small they can actually be ingested into our bodies. And at that internal cellular level, the radioactive properties are strong enough to penetrate our cell membranes and do damage at a DNA level. And then the chemical toxicity of heavy metal powder is enough to cause damage, just like sprinkling lead in our water and drinking it down might do.
Right.
So it wasn't merely that we left some shells behind, it's that we unloaded so many tons of these weapons and they exploded all over the country, and we left a kind of chemical dust, a toxic dust all over the country.
Mm.
Now, that's a theory. I need to be clear. That's a theory. There's been no field research that could tie anything that's happened in Iraq definitively back to those weapons. But anecdotally, there are a lot of people who have cried foul and asked for further research on this, including a lot of U.S. military whose own exposure to the aerosolized depleted uranium has caused many American soldiers to get sick, and they suspect that maybe our own weapons are causing our own people to get sick. Never mind the Iraqi people.
Right.
So it was kind of the combination in the environment that we were in that started us asking questions about huge number of Iraqi children we were seeing born with birth defects. Now, the stressors of war in and of themselves are horrible and could cause birth defects for a mother. Just the stress of trying to carry a child to term with bombs going off around you. The stress could be a factor. There could be any number of other factors, but the simple story that we heard of Saddam Hussein using chemical weapons against his people, and then in response to that, the Americans using chemical weapons or radioactive weapons against the population. Uh, it was horrifying enough to really get our attention and get us involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how exactly are you involved for our listeners who aren't familiar with you? I know obviously you guys are on the ground doing things. So what is it that you're doing to? I know this is not necessarily Francis of Assisi to spread the gospel without talking, right? Without just actually doing the gospel
Yeah.
with your hands and feet.
Yeah. So fast forward a number of years, I'll skip over some important stuff, but what we have evolved into um, is an organization that is working to end war. We've seen enough war. We've lived through enough war. We've been shot at. We've been bombed. We've been on the brink of kidnapping, and we've seen how it affects millions and millions and millions of people, tens of millions over decades in multiple countries now. So our work has grown. We are a coalition around the world working to end war, but we're not anti-war activists. We're not out lobbying politicians and smothering ourselves in red paint and trying to do stunts and get people's attention. Our our way to end war is a little more sophisticated than that, I think. And so we're coupling kind of the best of philosophical, communal, theological thinking to tactical, hard, risky, gutsy, on the ground work. Often these two things don't meet. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but you often get very philosophical, heady activist groups, purist activist groups who are extremely smart, who know history really well, or you get kind of all tactical experts who know how to do sanitation or who know economics or who know how to deliver emergency relief. But sometimes finding those two things together is really rare in a response
Mm.
organization. So we try to bring the best of both worlds: high level vision and history and philosophy and theology type thinking, coupled with tactical emergency relief, long term economic development. And we're asking questions like, how do we stop the spread of violence? How do we protect vulnerable people from being recruited into violence? And how do we change the ideas and behaviors that lead to violence?
Hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Well, so Jeremy, I know you kind of, it seems like anyway, you started off in Iraq with some of this, but I know your teams have moved to other places around the globe to address where you've seen some suffering and where there's a place that you can render some aid in a practical way. Well, so can you let us know, let our listeners know, like, what are some of the places right now Preemptive Love is working, and just in a nutshell, what kind of work are you doing in each of these places?
Yeah, so our our business model is a little different than a lot of organizations our size and bigger who tend to rely on at this size. It's very common that you're getting big grants from the United Nations or some country's government or whatever, and we do some of that. But the core of our business model relies on monthly donors, and what those monthly donors have allowed us to do is continue to be flexible and responsive to get into situations kind of faster than I think we might be able to otherwise if we were only left responding to whatever headline news emergency was going off at any given time. We're not left in a position where we're constantly playing catch up or reaction. We're able to forecast out 5, 10, 30 years down the road and say, if we want to end war, if we want to stop the spread of violence, then we can't just be responding in Syria when a chemical weapon goes off. We do that. But we also have to be looking down the road and think, what is the next major source of conflict going to be in the world? And so, with some of that macro level thinking, our work has grown over the years. We are now involved in Iraq, Syria, and kind of throughout Latin America, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela being a majority of what we're focused on right now. I think as we forecast down the road, if we think about refugees, people who have been displaced, people who are on the run for safety and on the run for their lives, it's pretty clear to me that Latin America is going to continue to be a very huge part of that story, and it's going to continue to put political pressure on the United States. And as the United States continues to figure out where we stand with regard to immigration, refugees, left versus right, Democrat, Republican, it's going to continue to dictate who we vote into office, which is going to have significant bearing on what kind of posture the United States takes in the world, which is going to have significant implications for war and violence globally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of draw a line between what's happening in Venezuela right now and then migration out of Venezuela throughout Central America up to the US Mexico border, border walls, Trump versus Hillary, Trump versus Biden, Trump versus Bernie. And then that conversation dictates who gets their hands on the nuclear football and determines a lot of what happens elsewhere in the world from that point forward.
Right. Yeah. And so I tell you what, Jeremy, I mean, hearing what you guys are doing and being aware of what Preemptive Love is doing in the world, number one, I'm incredibly impressed and moved to see how much you are doing. But at the same time, I don't envy you at all because I feel like once you start trying to take this, as you were saying, sort of this wider view of what's going on in the world and look for ways we can be effective, it just seems like it is a never-ending thing. It is a bottomless pit of, because you know, there's things going on in Africa. There's famines. There's like the war in Yemen, which is heartbreaking and creates all sorts of human suffering. And so it's like, yeah, you're only one organization. You have limited resources. This is a globe. There are global problems that even if you were just to say, we're just going to focus all of our resources on Syria, it would still be an overwhelming thing. I would imagine, right? Like you're not going to solve that problem. You're not going to address every amount of human suffering going on if you just picked Iraq or Venezuela. And yet you don't want to focus on one to the detriment of others. So I don't know, how do you make these decisions? And I guess honestly, how can people who are listening, who are frustrated with some of these things that they see, who don't know how they can make a difference with some of all the suffering we're seeing in the world, how can we partner with you guys to help what you're doing?
I'm so glad you brought up that scale issue because there's two major things that we're doing to think at scale. One is our digital jobs platform. So rather than only helping Mohammed get his sandwich shop back up and running in bombed out Aleppo, rather than only helping Forrest start a soap company so that we can sell his soap abroad and he can sell his soap locally. We do that. But it's really hard to help 100 million refugees as we look down the road at climate refugees and conflict refugees. It's really, I mean, it's impossible to start 100 million soap companies, 100 million sandwich shops. Like it's not going to happen. And so we've been asking questions: what kind of infrastructure, what kind of thinking, what kind of vision do we need to have so that we can start asking for solutions, building solutions for the 100 million people problem? The only thing that gets us there is a digital solution. There is no real world physical scale that you can do to get to that. So we're building digital solutions that at least allow us to reasonably start dreaming about providing jobs for millions of people. You know, our digital job solution we're building and currently engaged in helping refugees earn money with nothing but their smartphone. So on the run from a dictator, on the run from climate change, in search of safety, if you have nothing but a smartphone, we are helping refugees earn money from their tent, from a bombed out building. All they need is a smartphone and a cellular connection. And it's easy to envision that, like an Uber, like any of these platform businesses that we've seen, it's easy to imagine that with time, scale, skill, a team, we can build the kind of technology that would allow millions and millions of people to find income on this platform, which will not in and of itself end war, but it helps to prevent people from being so vulnerable that they can be recruited into war. Because once the bombs start falling, if there's no way whatsoever to go out to your sandwich shop, to go out to your restaurant, we're all experiencing this globally around the world right now. We've all been shut out of our physical workplaces I'm making this call in during the middle of COVID-19 sequestration, quarantine, and I think we're all getting a tiny taste of what it's like to be a refugee and have your life shut down. And our digital jobs platform allows us to actually keep money flowing into refugees' hands digitally in the cloud, even if life outside is a little unsafe.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. That's very very forward thinking.
that's kind of the backdrop, I guess, to your more pointed question, which is how can people support us and get involved. The single greatest thing that most listeners can do is join us as a monthly donor, join our monthly giving community at any amount. Those monthly donors help us respond fast with relief when a chemical weapon goes off, when refugees are starving because of COVID-19 quarantine and they can't get access to food, and we show up with tens of thousands of pounds of food for refugee camps. Those monthly donors make it all happen for us. They also keep the digital jobs platform growing and building so that we can add thousands and thousands of new refugees to that platform every month. So monthly donors really make the world go round for us. If you've got any listeners out there who are thinking about their legacy, who are retired, who are looking to give significantly greater sums of money, we've got plans and mechanisms to deploy millions of dollars as well. So money really helps us move forward in our vision to end war in those countries I've listed around the world.
Yeah. So where do people go specifically where they can sign up to be a monthly donor or get in contact with someone if they have a a greater sum of money that they can give? I'm sure you guys have a website and things like that, right?
Yeah, all of that is easily available at preemptivelove.org. Preemptive Love is our organization. I know preemptive can be a little tricky to spell. Our motto that a lot of people associate with us in the name of my new book is Love Anyway. So if that's easier to remember, you can find your way to us at loveanyway.com as well.
Awesome.
Great.
Wow. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. And I just want to say, my wife, Wendy and I, we love Preemptive Love. We were so excited for the work you're doing. Happy to support you and recommend your ministry to people all the time. And so I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you and to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about your heart, your vision, and what's happening with Preemptive Love around the world. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye. Oh, Jeremy Courtney, man, so good. Love that guy. Love what they do. Preemptive Love Coalition, one of my favorite organizations. They're just doing some killer work. And Jeremy, love your heart. Thank you, man, for being our Heretic of the Week.
Yeah.
You rock, man.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, if you I would just say I think it's one of the best organizations out there. If you are someone who has the means to donate, give them the funds because they're doing the real work out there. They're really helping and blessing a lot of people. If you want, I hate using the word blessing, but you know what I mean.
Derek, I would have loved to have been in on this conversation. What about you? What's up with this?
Listen, I'm telling you, we need to start our own podcast.
We do, where we can interview our own people and be in on the conversation. What would that be?
Yeah, what would you call it?
I don't know. We have Valentine and we have Day.
How about Valentine's Day?
There you go.
I think we can get edgier. We'll let you all know.
That's fine. Okay. Let us, hit us up on the hotline and give us your best podcast name for Derek and Katie.
Yeah, for the spinoff, yes.
We would love that, but seriously, we'll be in on conversations in the near future, and you can tell that we're working way far ahead for all of the listeners.
That's right.
Yep.
And
make it funny, damn it! Make it funny.
Your probation period is almost over, guys.
Yes. A+.
Whew. Thank you, Jesus.
Yes. So let's get into it. We've got another Sermon on the Mount episode, and this time we're going to get the Lord's Prayer. And I got to be honest, man, I don't pray. So I'm going to kick the can.
Oh, you got to have something to say.
I got something to say, but I want to hear from you all first because I literally don't pray words.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
All righty.
I'm curious what everyone's feelings are about the Lord's Prayer. I had mixed feelings in in thinking about this. There's times when the Lord's Prayer for me is super comforting, and I like saying it with other people. And there's other times where I'm like, why?
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious where everyone is just on a basic, what do we think about it before we get into the details?
Yeah, I'm on the Y end of the spectrum, Katie. That's where I am. I mean, that's and mind you, I don't pitch my tent anywhere. I'm not into campfire theology, right? For me, it's all about the journey, not about the destination. So I don't camp out anywhere, but basically, I'm at Y. That's my point in the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, it's funny. What you just said there, Katie, was you said, sometimes when you enjoy saying this with other people, right? And a lot of times that's kind of the context. I think nowadays, like if we're in a group of other Christians, we'll say, let's stand and repeat the Our Father together. But what's funny is I think that in itself is sort of the exact opposite of what Jesus is actually telling us to do in this passage.
Bingo.
Right? I mean, because if you back it up, right, the whole thing starts in Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 5, and he says, when you pray, first of all, he gives you a list of things not to do. He says, first of all, don't be like the hypocrites, because they love to pray standing in the synagogues or on the street corners to be seen by men. So, like, basically, he's not in favor of public prayer, which right there, I mean, what we just described is standing up and praying in public. So Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't pray in public. He says, I tell you the truth, those people have received their reward in full. And then he says, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. So in other words, it's meant to be this sort of private, quiet thing just between you and God. It's not meant to be this kind of sort of public display, right? And he says, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And it says in verse 7, and when you pray, again, here's another one, do not keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. And again, that almost feels like, again, like, hey, everybody, let's just repeat this prayer, this rehearsed prayer. And we're just going to go through the motions like we do. And again, that's, and so
that cuts down the Baptist right there.
Yeah. So we're kind of already doing exactly what he said not to do. And that in itself to me is kind of ironic. So I do want to say, before we get into the actual Our Father part of the prayer and what we think that's all about, I think it's important just to point out that I don't think we have truly really grasped everything he's saying, what he wants to say about prayer. Anyway,
But listen, I want to get in touch with my inner Emerald Lagasse here, right? And verse 9.
Who's that?
Emerald Lagasse. Come on, man. Cooking. Bam.
Right?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, bam. Right.
Thank
you.
Bam.
Oh man,
Giles.
Thank you. Where'd Bear come from?
So here's the deal. Verse 9. He says, "After this manner, therefore pray ye." This is the thing that I really hang my hat on when it comes to the Lord's Prayer, because Jesus never said, pray this prayer. He said, pray after this manner. I think of it in terms of education, or, basically, and Katie, you'll identify with this being, having, being an advanced theologian and many degrees and all of that, is that if you give your students, you have 30 students, you give them the same outline, you will get 30 unique papers.
Mm-hmm. You better,
So
you better anyway, because if you don't,
sometimes it's like 40, even when there's only 30 papers. Yeah.
But here's what I'm saying is that basically Jesus says, pray after this manner. In other words, he's giving us a template. Yeah. He's given us a model, an outline. Yeah. It's a type. It's not, and it's funny because I grew up primarily Baptist. And I'm going to tell you something. In a Baptist church, you don't begin service without the recitation of the Lord's Prayer. So,
and you also have to pray. If you go freestyle, though, you got to remember to pray in King James, too. You got to say thou and all that stuff.
Oh, and it depends on which Baptist church, because, whether it's your, forgive us our debts or forgive us our trespasses. And depending on which church you're in, you could be guilty of heresy.
Right. I've done both too. And I always try to check when I'm in a new church now, or when I'm
if I'm in a new church, I mumble.
I mumble. Yeah.
I mumble. Yeah.
Well, I wish someone would tell all the Christians who like to yap on and on and on about how we need to bring prayer back in school and do all this stuff publicly about this passage, because that would be a nice reminder for them.
Isn't that interesting? I never even thought of that, Matt, but that's exactly right. Next time I see these Christians going on about prayer in school and things like that, I'm just quote right there when Jesus
Oh,
says, "Do not pray in public."
listen, I cut people off right away when they start talking about prayer in school because listen, I don't want you teaching my kids shit concerning God.
Right. Why do I
Because
want
I
my
don't
public
no,
school
I
teacher to teach religion to my kid?
yeah,
Yeah,
I no, that I'll handle that.
thank
I'll
you.
handle that. And as far as prayer in school goes, that as long as there are tests in school, there will be prayer in schools. As long as
Yeah,
there are bullies in school, there will be prayer in school. As long as there are boys that like girls and girls that like boys and boys that like boys and girls that like girls, as long as that is in school, there will be prayer in school.
amen.
But I will say there's a couple things I do like about the Lord's Prayer specifically. One thing that stands out to me is that the forgiveness part.
Mhm.
It's the forgiveness is already done. There's no quid pro
Yeah,
quo. There's nothing like that. There's no like if I do this, then this is going to happen. It's like this is something I already do. So to me, it's like, well, if anyone's holding sins against anyone, who is that? It shouldn't be anyone because this
right.
whole thing of forgiveness is preemptive. So that's one thing that stands out that I do like. I don't necessarily pray it, but I try to live it.
And yeah, I got to preach on forgiveness in a UU church a couple of months ago, which was really fun because I can let my inner woo woo just fly in a UU church generally, at
Yeah,
least the one where I
Woo woo
live.
and the you.
And
woo
oh
woo.
yeah, yeah, they're totally
Woo!
cool with it. It's so much fun. So UU Chico, I got your back here. And so
You.
the as we forgive, I use debts as we forgive our debts, as we have forgiven our debtors, also presumes that we've forgiven.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So we are expected to forgive before we ask for forgiveness. And I don't think it's that simple because, in my experience, forgiveness is a daily choice that I have to make,
Right.
especially against enemies. And sometimes it comes really slowly, but I have to be in that kind of frame of mind while I seek forgiveness as well. And that it can be so abusive, but it can be so liberating.
Yeah, and this is something I always try to point out when we talk about this the Lord's Prayer, and maybe this is only something for me. I don't know if everyone else has this problem when they approach the Lord's Prayer, but I, for the longest time, I did because when I would look at the Lord's Prayer, even read it or repeat it or think about it, um, I think in my mind, I always took it to be sort of a prayer. It's basically just, it's me talking to God. And it's sort of like, hey, God, these are things I want for myself. Like, okay, so you start off with our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Okay, get that out of the way. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Okay, yep, got it. That's great. But then it's sort of like, okay, God, now here's my list. Here's what I need. I need daily bread. I need you to forgive me. I need you to lead me not into temptation. I need you to deliver me from evil and all that. And so, I think again, I always thought of it as mostly a petitionary prayer and mostly a prayer about the things that I needed God to do for me. And it was only a few years ago that I noticed how the entire prayer that Jesus gives us is a communal prayer. It's a prayer about us, not about me. It's about a
Mhm.
community, right? Even at the beginning, it's our Father, not my Father. It's
Right.
our Father. So even when I begin the prayer, I'm praying to not just my God, but to our God, everyone's God, right? And then, yes, hallowed be your name. And I'm praying for his kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven, which again, we can talk about that in a second because that's probably a very key part of the prayer. But then again, it goes straight into the verse 11, give us our daily bread, not just give me my daily bread. Like I'm supposed to be praying that we all would have our daily bread. And then I'm praying that God would forgive us. Again, it's us, our debts or our trespasses as we, not just me, also have forgiven our debtors. So again, it's a wide open, arms wide open prayer that's embracing the entire community. And I think one of the things that it's helped me now, I love now that I can see that because it helps me recognize that when Jesus is teaching us to pray, the type of prayer, like you were saying, Derek, the type of prayer that Jesus wants us to pray is a prayer that takes into consideration the needs of everyone, not just myself. That I'm encouraged to see that everyone needs their daily bread. Everyone needs forgiveness. Everyone needs this protection, right? And I should be concerned about that when I come to God, and even recognizing that He is not just my Father, not just the Christian Father, not just the Baptist Father, right? But He's everyone's Father. And that has been really helpful to me, just to break out of that sort of singleness of, like, it's not just about me, it is about everyone.
One of the things for me about the Lord's Prayer and praying in community, and I do take everyone's, not being showcasey in our prayers out loud, but I think that's also wholly hyperbole. I'm not sure that Jesus meant never pray in public, like never pray in community. And we know the early Christians were praying the Lord's Prayer in community together. And I did a little research. It's quoted in the Didache, second century kind of instructional manual for Christians, and it says actually to pray this three times a day. So it was done publicly and privately. But one thing I love about pre-prepared prayers like the Lord's Prayer is that when I don't have words, but I need words, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's when you're supposed to speak in tongues, Katie.
Right.
Mosquito kickstand.
I've never had the gift, sadly, so my Pentecostal self will not be ascending. But when I literally don't have words, when I'm in grief, when I'm in shock, when I'm in whatever that state is, these words are available and provide something for me. And there's something about people having spoken this in community for 2,000 however many years now, that's daunting and humbling. And we have all the potential abuses, but we have all the potential comfort in that too. And there's something about that strikes at my heart in a good way. Not that we have to say this verbatim, because I do agree it's a template for being in community, for seeking justice. But there's something about the words being spoken across time and space. And when I've been in churches in other countries and they've spoken this, and I say it in English and they say it in their language, that's very powerful.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think that also then emphasizes that community aspect of it too, right? Because it's hearing it in their language and you're doing it in your language. It's the acknowledgement and recognition that there's sort of this global body of Christ, right? We're connected to one another. Again, it's not just this localized idea. It is something global, and it's expansive. It's beyond our typical, what we can see and touch.
And one of the things that I take away from it is that it's an inside out approach. You're starting from within and working your way out. So basically, when you say our Father, and who art in heaven, where is heaven? Where is God's dwelling place? Well, God's dwelling place is in us.
Exactly.
So technically that's heaven. So basically, we're starting from within and working outward. And then it says, "Thy kingdom come." That is the will, the culture, the intent of the kingdom of God. Let it be manifest. And then you say, "Thy will be done." I'm sorry, hallowed be thy name. That's the one I wanted to key on, because the name, people say do things in the name of Jesus and the power of the name and all of that. And I see that a little bit differently, because when we're talking about the name, we're not talking about a physical name like we think of Keith or Katie or Matt. That's not what it is. It's the authority. It's basically the signet, or the basically the seal, right? So it's we're recognizing your authority, not so much the name, because if you think about it in the context of the Old Testament, you couldn't say the name of God. So why would you reverence this name that can't be spoken? It's more the authority, the signet, the seal. So we're recognizing that power, that authority.
And piggybacking off of what you're saying, Derek, if we're starting from within, this is why this whole like dispensationalist rapture theology has never worked, and will never actually work. Is that when we actually pray the Lord's Prayer, we're not praying like we're going out somewhere. We're not going to be raptured out somewhere. We're praying that heaven is manifest on earth in this place. Yeah. So it's heaven starting like within the kingdom, like heaven is within us. It's in our midst. And it is to be manifest out in this earth. There's not some sort of like, I don't even know how to put it. rapture that takes us away from this place. It gets us down to the nitty gritty of it right here and now, and doing God's work and reconciliatory work, justice work, peace work in this place now.
Well, let me throw something in right quick, because I'm a big space nerd, and one of the big things that's talked about in terms of space exploration now is the colonization of Mars. And one of the things that's frequently spoken about the colonization of Mars is this technique called terraforming. In other words, you introduce plant and flora into the Martian atmosphere that basically changes the chemical composition of the breathable atmosphere, and it also changes the soil, the terrain. And so it's making something foreign habitable for human life. So when we say thy kingdom come, thy will be done in the earth as it is in heaven, what we're saying is, we want to terraform this space for spiritual occupation.
Say that one more time. I like it. I'm just wrapping my mind around it.
Basically, we're saying that we're terraforming the earth for spiritual occupation.
That's your new book title. That's our podcast title, Derek, right there.
Terraforming.
Yes. Terraforming. Yes. No, I think that's an interesting way of thinking of it. Yeah, that's you guys are right on. I think that's exactly right, and that was a huge epiphany for me years ago. Like, to recognize that the gospel wasn't about getting out of here, some Disneyland I was going to visit after I died, but it was really about the kingdom. It wasn't even about the kingdom coming now. Like, well, that'll be nice one day. It's like, no, Jesus said it's already here. 2,000 years ago, he said, the kingdom of good news, right?
Yeah.
Think differently. The kingdom of God is already here. It's here now. It's within you.
He said it's at hand.
Yeah. And it's within you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, basically, that's what metanoia means. Not repent. That doesn't mean feel sorry for your sins. Like, totally change the way you see this thing. And
game changer.
Yeah. Begin to see and think so completely radically different that the kingdom of God is this place you're standing in right now. Look at your feet, look at the ground, right? Look around you. This is it. This is the kingdom of God. And again, then it makes this prayer so much more powerful, right? To pray that this kingdom would come. But again, we're not just, sitting around waiting for Jesus to do it, because Jesus has already told us, no, it's within you. And you're supposed to be working on that right now. We have this ministry of reconciliation that you were saying, Matthew. We've been given this. We're ambassadors of this kingdom.
Well, and the only way we can do greater things is in community. And Jesus said we would do greater things, but I don't think he meant individually do greater things. I meant as a community we will do greater things.
That's right.
Yep.
Exactly. Love it.
So I'm curious where we have some problems with the Lord's Prayer, and I have two. I'm curious where everyone lands on this. So one is the Father, like we call this the Our Father and Lord's Prayer. And this sometimes I'll say it, but it sometimes grates at me a little bit with the patriarchal language.
Yes.
So we have both Father, sort of always presuming God is male. And I hear people talk a lot about the interpersonal relationship of Jesus and the Father here. And I think some of that's true, and that this is advocating a personal relationship. And I like all of that. But Father is not neutral.
Right.
Like, and even even saying Abba, that's not neutral in the ancient world. This is a figure with authority.
I'm at the point now where Mama works for me.
Yeah, and that it works for a lot of people. I like Creator.
Creator's good.
Yeah,
but
Creator.
I like to make it personal. I'll say Papa, I'll say Mama, and sometimes I'll say what God, what he wants is what she wants to do. I'll mix the pronouns deliberately. Just to make it gender neutral.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So I think we need to take a second and say a couple of things about this beginning part, this Father part at the beginning. Like, first of all, what Jesus is not trying to say. Jesus is not trying to say, hey, everybody, God has a penis. He's a man, right? So when you pray, you better pray, dear man in the sky. So that's not what he's trying to do. And if we get that impression, if we feel as if that's what Jesus is the point he's trying to make, that's not at all what he's trying to say. But you are right. There are definitely some patriarchal sort of threads on this, and we do have to be careful about that and make sure that we're not doing that. I mean, for me, and maybe this is a better question to ask, Because for me, what Jesus is doing when he starts it out by saying our Father or Abba, literally he says Abba, which is Papa, Daddy.
No, it's pater.
Oh, it's Pater.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It's in the vocative. We have very few vocatives.
Okay.
Nouns, but yeah, this one is pater.
But that idea of God as Father, right, is either Father or Abba, is intended to be. I mean, I think it's a radical thing. I think it's a very Jesus emphasizes this more than anyone else in the scriptures. This idea of God as not this impersonal force and being far away, but as what he's trying to think. I would say what he's trying to communicate is that God is loving. He is like a father who loves and cares for his children, not this angry sort of, again, this wrathful force up in the sky. So
sure, it's the afterlife of all of that can be problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so it's not the original intent of Jesus. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
But it's the afterlife. We talked about this a little bit in the PSA episode. But it's the that fathers in the ancient world had ultimate power.
Yeah.
Over their household. And I frankly don't need another parent. I have two whom I love a lot, and they love me, and we have a good relationship. I don't need a third.
Yeah.
I need something else. Like that relationship, parent relationship in relationship to God just does not work for me.
So let's unpack that for a second, because that's a good point. And so maybe that's
like Jesus, I feel the freedom to reinterpret.
Well, no, but that's a say on that though, because I'm curious. Do we feel that we could make a case that Jesus is trying to say that God is your sort of parent in the way we would think of a parent, like he makes the rules, you do what he says, you know what I mean, like you're under his authority? Because like, even when you look at the parable, right, of the prodigal son, where he gives us a father, the father in that parable doesn't behave like someone who says, hey son, shut up and follow my rules or you're going to get the boot, right? So I think Jesus even is subversive in the way he uses father. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I actually think we make some assumptions about what father means or what Jesus might mean by invoking father. But I think the way he actually talks about the father, even in itself, is something that's sort of subversive of even the idea of parent in that way.
I like the way Paul Young did it in the Shack. You know, he called God Papa, but Papa was a black woman.
I love that. Yes.
and to me that was perfect because you know it takes it reinforces on the one hand the Papa part of it, the Abba part of it, but on the other hand it relieves us of the baggage of the paternal aspect of God. So when I see Papa, Mama, Source, Creator, I don't, you know, I see a gender fluidity. It's still a person. It's still someone that I can communicate with, that I can have a relationship with, but it's not just some, big, big white dude with a beard, hanging out on a cloud.
Exactly.
Well, and if this is a template, as we said, Katie, do you have any ideas on or ways that you reimagine it in your own personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I think creator works for me a lot. More and more source, but with a much more personal relationship than the sort of typical metaphysical new age kind of crowd might use. So very deeply personal, deeply cares about the world, about community, about each and every one of us. But I don't know, the father mother language kind of makes me. I don't know why, but it makes me a little uneasy because there is a power dynamic there no matter what. No matter how much we reimagine that, no matter how loving that is, there is a power dynamic between a parent and a child.
Yeah.
And it always imagines us as children. I don't particularly want to be imagined as a child. I'm a grown-up. That's something I've had to work in my professional life. I mean, as a woman, I've had to constantly prove myself that I'm not infantilized.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be infantilized in my relationship with God.
Yeah, and I think a good way to think of that too is that I don't think God would want you to think, to approach God with that kind of idea, right? Like God knows you completely. God knows who you are. God relates to you. I believe God meets us where we are. And so because of that, I think God is totally cool with you relating to God in a way that that the emphasis is on the connection and less on the the particulars of that. Well, okay, now are you the child? Am I the father? Okay, are you the mom? This, you know what I mean? Like that, forget about that stuff. Like, I think that's less important, right? And I think it's cool. I think we have permission, at least in my mind, we kind of have permission to reapproach God again with those sort of understandings that God is love. God does know us. God does want what's best for us. And if those things get in the way, then yeah, don't use them.
Yeah, totally. And I'm trying to imagine what would happen in sort of, the churches that we've all come from if we said our mother or our creator
You'd
or
be rolled
are
out.
they, right? So
yeah, hit the door.
But for so many of us, the father language is so inscribed and it goes so deep in both positive and destructive ways.
Yeah.
Well, we also have to consider the cultural context here too, because the thing is, Jesus is speaking to an audience of people at their level of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This isn't, he's not speaking in 21st century language that we would understand. He's speaking at a level of understanding of the first century Jew.
Yeah.
And so that was the context. And so we have to take that into consideration when we're processing this.
Yeah, and in the ancient world, there were we talked about this recently with honor shame culture. There's no co-equals, right? Everyone is in a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
every single person. That's somewhat reflected here, even though it's mitigated. I think Jesus is mitigating that and saying, like, there's another way for us to be.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And ultimately, though, I think if we get hung up on the language, then we've missed the point. Just like the parables of Jesus, if we get hung up on this is what it means, then we don't understand parables. Just like if we have to say that, oh, this shows that God is masculine rather than feminine, and I mean, or even getting hung up on any sort of the parental language, I think it's. I don't want to speak for Jesus. He certainly can speak for himself. But I think, just knowing the type of Jesus I read about, I think he would be like eye rolling or face palming if we get hung up on the actual words he said rather than the meaning behind the meaning.
Exactly.
And that's what our churches do too often. They point this and say, see, he said father. And so therefore, God needs to be thought of as man, male, father. Even if he said mother, I think we'd be hung up on that and said, well, no, do what works for you. Like Derek said at the beginning, like pray in this manner rather than and not don't get hung up on these words. Then you've missed the whole point.
I agree.
You guys have laid out expressly why I am no longer a biblical literalist.
Hallelujah.
All right, I can amen to that, brother.
Yes.
So there's one other problem with the Lord's Prayer that I feel like we should explore. Are y'all ready for a little Greek?
Oh, yeah, bring it on.
Drop it on us.
Yep, okay. All right, so we have in verse 11, give us this day our daily bread. The word that we translate as daily, we do not know what it means.
Mm.
So the word is epiousios. It's I'm gonna throw out a fancy word. It's a hapax legomena, which means this is like the first time it occurs in Greek literature.
Yeah. Oh, hapax legomena,
yeah, just the first time. Yeah. and it's every other time it occurs, it's quoted. It's someone is early Christian writers are quoting this prayer.
Mm.
And so when I say we don't know what it means, we don't know what it means. So scholars have not a consensus, but there's a vast majority who are like daily probably isn't it. So it's a compound word, comes from the prefix epi, and then the word ousia. And so when we translate it as daily, that's coming from a Latin interpretation of what this means. But the word day, daily, none of the words that mean that appear at all in this verse. It could also mean having to do with substance, like ousia as substance.
That's where I am.
Yeah, I thought that was really provocative. Yeah, like give us our bread of substance, or that wouldn't quite be it, but something like that.
Yeah, I would say provision. That's
provision.
Where I am. No, yeah. Provision.
Yeah.
Give me what I need right now. And let me say this, that when I don't, like Matthew said, I don't pray anymore, not like prayer. The only thing, the conversations that I have with God is I need wisdom concerning this. And so what I'm asking for is a provision to help bring forth a vision. That's all I ask for. So when I look at that and I say, "Give us this day our daily bread," it's like, okay, Pop, what do I need for today?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need for this moment? And that's
Yeah, and the other opportunity, and Derek, I thought you would really like this one, is that it's also usias can also be derived from the verb to be, like it's the noun version of the verb to be, and so then it's give us our being with bread.
Ooh.
So really matching that spirit and the physicality of bread and wheat.
I like that.
Yeah, and so there's these,
give us our being. Give us our being.
And bread is in there. Like bread is certainly a word, but the words for day or daily don't appear. So it's a weird wrinkle.
Yeah,
that's more fodder for our podcast, Katie.
Yes.
Can I just say I have a problem with that because I have celiac and I can't do bread. So what am I supposed to do?
Die.
Rice cakes.
Die.
Just die. Just die.
Make it gluten-free, man.
Hey, I got the gluten-free Lord's Prayer. That's what I want. Come on.
There you go.
Nowadays, yes.
You know what? My departing gift from the church when I my last Sunday there when I was a pastor was to provide little bowls to put in the communion plates that would hold the gluten-free crackers, because I'm very clumsy, and so every time I would get the tray, I would tilt it, and then the gluten-free and the gluten would kind of mix together.
Shame on you.
Cross the stream.
Not anymore. I gave them little olive bowls.
Right. Good. Never cross the streams.
Hey, you know what I got when I left my church as a parting gift?
Kick me ass.
I got a left boot.
That's not what they gave me. It's what I gave them.
Okay. Well, you're so nice. I got the left foot of fellowship.
That's right.
They were very sweet. They were very sweet to me when I left. So.
That's good.
All right.
Hey, that's a nice thing when you leave and they bless you on the way out. That's good.
Oh no, it was a great departure. I attend the church now, so we're all good.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. This was good. But we're gonna have to wrap it up at some point. But before we do, I just want to remind our listeners that we have a website. It is heretichappyhour.com. Bookmark it. You're going to be able to stay up to date on the episodes. Check out our store. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts, pillows, hats, all that kind of good stuff. And check it out today.
After you check that out, come join our Facebook group, Heresy After Hours, where we currently have 2,039 heretics just like you, asking tough questions with a sense of style. It's snarky, it's supportive, it's wonderful. Come join us there. It's free for everyone. And for those of you who do decide to become Patreons, you have an exclusive group that is just for Patreons only. I just did a Facebook Live in there today about the naked young man who runs away in the Gospel of Mark during the arrest of Jesus. So you get lots of bonuses like that with your co-host.
Oh yeah, baby. Yeah.
He commented on it.
Yes, I did. It was salacious. So yeah. And speaking of Patreon, you know what? If you love the podcast and you want bonus stuff, extra stuff, like when this podcast is over, I just wish I had an extra 20 minutes. Well, if you support us for at least $2 a month or more, you will unlock so many amazing goodies. Like on day one, you'll instantly have access to bonus podcast material, bonus interviews that we've done, just all kinds of cool stuff. And so just head over to patreon.com/heretichappyhour. And join up and sign up and unlock all these amazing goodies.
Listen, if you like this podcast, if you listen to this podcast, please like, subscribe, share, and most of all, go to iTunes and rate this podcast. Give it a 5-star rating. Because if you don't, what will happen? We have an algorithm built into iTunes that will respond to you and call you an asshole or a dick. Alternately, if you don't give us a 5-star rating. So be sure to like, subscribe, and rate us highly.
Do it.
Everyone needs to have an Epiusius day.
Epiusius.
Damn scholars and their words.
I know.
Not me, it's Jesus.